Hello guys and welcome back. Today we are going to implement a dodging feature to our character. As you can see, I have an animation here. You can get one from wherever. Mine is just a subtle jump back. We're also going to link this dodging feature with falling, because if you dodge in the air, you're going to want to transition to a falling animation or else it will look kind of awkward. So let's go to our override layer here. I'm going to drag in my dodging animation. I'm just going to rename it to dodge. And I'm going to make a transition back to the empty state, and I'm going to add a condition, and I'm actually going to transition it to the falling state as well, and you're going to go to either or depending on the condition. So let's right click here and we can make a transition on the falling state, and we're going to use the is grounded condition to check for this. So what I mean by that is we're going to go over here now and I'm going to pull it to the left so you can get a better idea what's happening. So we're going to click on the arrow that goes to the falling, and if we go to the following, we want the condition to be that we are not grounded. So with that, we can use our is grounded bool on our parameters, and we're going to say if that's false, then we're going to transfer to the falling animation. Then we're going to add a condition here, and if is grounded is true, we're going to transfer to the empty state, which will allow us to go back to our locomotion. So I'm going to take off has exit time for going towards the falling animation. That way there's no delay. The second you are off the ground, you will go right into the falling animation. Alright, next, moving along swiftly, we actually need to install our functionality, or create our function rather, for the actual dodging. So let's start with our player controls, and you're familiar with this by now. We're going to create a new player button on our player actions. So I'm just going to create something very similar to how we handle our sprinting here. We're just using the shift and the east button on the gamepad. I will create a new action. I'm just going to call this X, as in for the X button on a controller, which will be the west button on a gamepad. I'm referencing, of course, an Xbox controller. I'm also going to create a keyboard shortcut too, because I don't have my controller with me right now, so I'm just going to use the X key on the keyboard as well. So I'm going to do that by saying add binding, and I'm just going to say X on the keyboard. Okay, good. Now we actually have to save this, and we actually have to go into our input manager and make sure we're getting a read whenever we hit the X button on the keyboard or the west button on the gamepad. So I'm going to open up the input manager first, and all the way at the top I'm going to make a bool. I'm just going to call it X input, very similar to how I handled B input, just public bool X input. And then on enable, we're going to say player controls dot player actions dot x dot performed plus equals I equals greater than X input equals true, which, as you know, means whenever the X input is detected, we are turning the X input bool on this script to true. Very straightforward. So I'm actually just going to put this right below the B input for neatness sake. Now let's go down here and create a private void handle dodge input. And it, again, is going to be very similar to our jumping input or our sprinting input. We're going to start by saying if X input is true, we're going to set that to false right away, so we don't keep hitting the button and you get that that doubling effect. And then we're going to actually just say do our dodge, and we're going to put that in player locomotion. So I'm just going to say handle dodge, and I haven't made it yet, so you're going to get an error. So let's just cross it out for now. And then let's go over to the player locomotion, and we can actually start incorporating this logic and creating it. So I'm just going to minimize the handle falling and landing, because we're not doing anything with that right now in this second. I'm going to say public void handle dodge, and I'm going to say if player manager dot is interacting, we're going to say return. We do this, so this is basically saying if we're already doing another action, we can't do this action right now. So if we're busy, just come back and we can't do this. And then we're going to copy animator manager play target animation, and we're going to say, just paste it down here, and we're just going to say, we're going to type in dodge, and we're going to say interacting is true. That way if we're we're dodging rather, we can't dodge again. It will stop us from making another dodge. Now we're going to want to use the root motion of this animation, which means we want our player to move the way the animation is moving. So we're going to have to set something up for that as well, which we're going to do. Or else we won't actually move, and when we play the animation, we'll stay in place, but the animation will play. But we want our player to move wherever the animation would move us. So first, let's go back to our input handler here, and let's uncross that. Now that works out because we have that function written. And let's go back to the player locomotion, and under handle dodge, I'm just going to put some pseudocode here. If you wanted to say, if you have a health system, you can say toggle invulnerability, or toggle invulnerable bool for no damage. So if you have any further development in your third-person controller, you can just make it so while you are dodging, you cannot take damage. Because that is the purpose of dodging most of the time, unless you just want your dodge to move you out of the way, in which case you don't need to do that. Okay, so next, over here on the handle all inputs, I'm going to say handle dodge input. So we're calling that every frame. Make sure we check for if we're pressing the X button so we can actually use our dodge. Next, on the animator manager, I'm going to make a comma, and I'm going to say bool. This is on play target animation. I'm going to say use root motion. I'm going to defaultly set that to false, so we don't have to change anything that we don't have to change any functionality where we call this by default. So by default, it will be set to false unless you want to change it. And then I'm going to go, and we're going to do a couple more things. First, I'm going to make a private void on animator move. Okay, and this checks every frame when you're playing an animation. It's going to basically run this logic. It's going to check for this logic. Just every frame in animation is being played, and your avatar is moving in some shape or form. So next up here, let's say bool use root motion. Actually, you know what? Just for neatness sake, we're going to throw this on the player manager, not the animator manager, because we have our is interacting there as well. Let's keep it all in the same place. So what we're going to do is go over here now, over to our player manager, and say public bool is using root motion. And then we're going to actually get this from the animator, just like our interacting. So we're going to say is using root motion is equal to animator.getBool is using root motion. We haven't made that yet, but we're going to. So let's just say that. And then when we actually declare an animation, we can change the animator's bool to true or false when we use our play target animation function. So let's go create the bool on our animator real quick right now. Just going to go here to parameters, create a bool, and we're going to say is using root motion. Excellent. Now we want to reset this all the time too, just like we reset our is interacting. So let's go to reset bool. And I'm just going to add another function, or another couple variables rather, and we can actually do all this in the same shebang. So when it comes back to the empty state, not only will we reset our is interacting, but we can also reset our is using root motion. So I'm just going to say public string is using root motion bool, and public bool is using root motion status. And just like our is interacting, I can say animator.setBool, and we're going to pass our is using root motion bool, and then we're going to pass the status of is using root motion status. So you can change this on the fly whenever you want. Now I'm just going to save this. There we go. Now go back into the animator window and let's put that in. Just going to paste this in here. Whoops, that is the code I copied. I'll copy it from the parameters. There we go. And we're going to leave it blank because we want it to reset to not using root motion when we go back to our local motion state. Okay, pressing along. So on the animator manager here, what we're going to do, right below the animator variable, I'm just going to call my player manager. And then I'm going to say on awake, player manager equals get component player manager. All right, and then on the on animator move, we're going to say if player manager dot is using root motion, then we're going to do this logic. And what are we going to do? Well, we want our character's location to go to wherever the avatar's location of the animator is. And by that I mean wherever the animator is putting the model, that's where we want to go to. Now under play target animation, we're going to say animator.setBool is using root motion to whatever is use root motion. So if we are changing use root motion to true when we call this function, we're changing it on the animator to true as well. And if it's true on the animator, then it's true in the player manager. And if it's true in the player manager, then we run the logic under on animator move. So let's call the player locomotion variable. I'm just going to say player locomotion equals get component player locomotion. And then we're going to actually make some adjustments to our rigid body if we are using root motion. So what we're going to say, let's make our rigid body public first on our player locomotion script. Whoops, that's a capital P, my bad. And then back over here on the animator manager, we're going to say player locomotion.player rigid body dot drag is equal to 0, just to reset it. And then we're going to say vector3. I'm just going to call this animator position. Actually, I think it's referenced as animator delta position. So let's call it delta position equals animator dot delta position. And you see how it says gets the avatar's delta position from the evaluated frame, the last evaluated frame. So wherever the avatar is of your character, it's going to get that position. And then we're going to say delta position.y equals 0. We always want y to be 0, so we're not moving up in the air. And then we're going to say vector3 velocity equals delta position divided by time.delta time. And then we will say player locomotion dot rigid body, or player rigid body dot velocity equals velocity. And this is just going to move our player's game object in accordance with the player's model, basically giving it root motion. So if the animation has actual jump back, your player will now jump back as well. And on Animator Manager here, we're going to say comma, and we're going to say true. That way we are going to use root motion when we play the dodging animation, so we will follow the actual dodging movement. So if I go into the game now, and I press the dodging button, you will see, boom, we have a dodging effect. However, if I come to the edge of the map over here, the ledge rather, and I dodge and fall off the edge, watch what happens. I'm moving down really slowly, and this is a very simple fix. It's because basically while we're falling, we're still using root motion is still on. We're still trying to use root motion, and we're not able to access our falling logic, which is actually supposed to add force to our rigid body. As you can see here, when we're falling right here, we're supposed to be adding force downward. But what's happening is we're not doing that because we're trying to it's trying to fight the code in the Animator Manager, which is trying to add the force of the animation. So we're going to say Animator Manager dot set bool, and what we're going to do is set is using root motion to false. That way we apply our own motion when we're falling in the air. So as soon as you go in the air, we're no longer using root motion. We are falling with our code right here. So what was happening was, again, just to clarify it right here on the Animator Manager, see, if we are using root motion, we're trying to take the velocity of the animation. And if your falling animation has no velocity, you get that weird effect. But now that we're just using our falling numbers, watch what will happen. We can go to the edge here, and we'll hop off, and boom, there you go. So now you have falling, and you have your dodging, which can link into your falling. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to drop a like, helps get the video around. Leave a comment to appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon below.